Hey, what's up? Welcome to Books, Builds, and More. My name is Travis, and today I'm doing a book review for the first book of Stephen King's Dark Tower series, The Gunslinger. Now, by no means do I consider myself a seasoned Stephen King reader. However, I do feel like I've read enough of his work by now to kind of be familiar with his writing style, which is what I want to tackle first in this book to get it out of the way. Now, of course, this isn't the first time that Stephen King has tackled alternate universes or any kind of supernatural or even fantasy style elements. But this one felt very different for Stephen King, I thought. The writing for a while, I could tell it was Stephen King, but at the same time, not. It just didn't feel like him at all. I felt the writing was kind of kaleidoscopic. That's the best analogy I've got for it, because it really was like looking through a lens and twisting it around and seeing all these different shapes, kind of recycling themselves, but remaining within the same kind of focal point. That's the best I've got for it. But once I got used to it, I didn't think it was that bad. And sticking with the writing structure for just one more moment, one thing I thought was interesting was the way the book was structured out. It's told in 5 basic long chapters, or parts, basically, because each of these chapters contain many chapters throughout. Most oftentimes told in backstory through Roland. And speaking of Roland, getting into the plot of the book now, not sure how to take that character. Really not sure how to take that character. Just very, very cold character. Very unfeeling. It seems like he's just kind of zombified in a way for his obsession to find the Dark Tower. I kind of got that, especially toward the end of the book, when something major kind of happens right before the end of the book. However, there were moments of weakness you could see in him. He is vulnerable. He does have emotion. There's even a little bitty slivers, but it's definitely there. But for the most part, right now, I don't really like him. I don't. I think he is just, he has no imagination. He's just a cold character. It's the best I can explain it. And that's just how I feel about it. Of course, keeping in mind, this is the first book of a pretty long series. So my thoughts on him will, I at least hope, change either one way or the other, because I do hope that the character gets a lot more depth than what he's given here. That's just my opinion. There are a few things about Roland that are at least somewhat intriguing, like, for example, his ability to hypnotize. I thought that was really, really cool. Albeit sinister, but cool. And his ability to be a gunslinger, because what I mean by that is, going back through his flashbacks, apparently being a gunslinger in this type of world is some type of order that you have to go through a rite of passage to belong to. And I thought that was pretty cool. And how he attained that, though, was pretty darn yeah, cold. I mean, that's the only adjective I have for this character right now. He's cold. But there are some potentials to this character, as I've just explained. And again, going through the series, I hope we get a lot more in depth with this character. And I don't care where it goes. He could be the most despicable character by the end of the series. He could be the hero, just as long as he gets more depth than what he has right now, in my opinion. And speaking of characters, let's talk about some of the secondary characters. I don't have too much to say about a lot of the characters, like even Roland's parents in the in the flashbacks and stuff, like Court and Martin and Cuthbert, and a lot of his boyhood pals, I guess you could say. That was a very odd friendship back in those days. So I hope this series gets a little bit more in-depth socially with this world as well. But right now, this book focused mostly on Roland and Jake, who a young boy that he befriends at his stop at the way station. And Jake just kind of tags along, or, well, Roland brings him along, basically. For reasons I won't spoil. However, one thing I will kind of spoil here is Jake. I really like Jake's character. And because of Jake's little background story, after Roland hypnotizes him. Okay, sorry for any kind of spoiler here, but with what happened to Jake in this book, I just don't think we've seen the last of the character. I just don't. I could be totally wrong about that. I have the whole rest of this series to prove me either right or wrong either way. But for now, I just don't think we've seen the last of Jake. But not only that, I have a very sneaky suspicion of who he actually is. Based on another book of Stephen King's that I'm going to hopefully get to later here within the next couple of weeks when I get to it and kind of make a more stable decision there. But also the Man in Black, who I think is pretty much the secondary character of this book, even more so than Jake, and that's the guy who calls himself Walter O'Dim. Yeah, this is a very interesting character. Uh, and quite honestly, my favorite character in this book so far. But I have a very strong suspicion of who the Man in Black actually is. I'm going to go ahead and say that I think it's a no-brainer. I'm not going to reveal it right now, but in case I'm wrong and I don't want to look like too much of an idiot, more than I already am, of course. But yeah, I do think that this book has given me some reason to, that's incentive. That's incentive for me to keep moving forward to find out these things that are just suspicion on my part alone. This novel is set in a world that's, I don't know how to describe it. It's alluded to several times as the world has moved on. So to me, that says it's far in the future. It's a reshaped Earth in a way, I guess. Especially when they one part, and I will minor spoil this, where they come across an old Amoco gas station sign, which just kind of and several artifacts and just mechanical devices and just touches of a historical Earth the way we know it. So it's very bizarre, but it's going to be very interesting to see how this unfolds throughout the series as well. I really don't have too much to say about this book right now because I'm going to rate it 4 stars, and that's a preliminary 4 stars. I think we didn't get enough information, and I'm glad for that actually, because oftentimes first books of series, in my own personal reading experience, have found that you can get bogged down with too much information, and then the rest of the series just kind of loses momentum and steam along the way. But this one, I think, is an okay starter book because you don't get bogged down with too much information, but you get just enough to keep you crawling back for more. And that's why I'm giving it 4 stars mostly. And also probably because the last part of the book, chapter 5, the entire last part of this book, well, and then the event that happened right before, at the end of part 4, was mostly my rating 2, because it was just like everything intense happened there, but it wasn't overly intense to where you could say, okay, I need to stop here. That's it. That's all I need to know. No, that's enough to keep you hooked. So yeah, depending on how the rest of the series goes, the rating for this might change. Also, quite a few people recommend reading this book after you read the entire series. So I'm not sure if I'm going to do that right away or not, just based on my first reading of this book. Again, I'm going to wait to see how the rest of the series plays out and how I feel about everything in this book before I make that decision. So yeah, that's all I've really got for this book right now. If things change, I might update along this journey, because I am doing the Dark Tower series as a personal reading goal for 2026. But I'm doing it as an extended read, so I will be touching on books throughout, because I do want this to be an actual journey, like a digital diary that I'm kind of doing with BookTube right now, all these videos, because I do plan to review each and every single book on the channel anyway, but definitely throughout this series. But also, I'm going to count this as my first read for another reading challenge I'm doing this year called the Jurassic Reading Challenge. And the first month of the year, January, covers the Tyrannosaurus Rex. And the idea behind that is to read a book, reread a book by your reread a favorite book, or read a book by your favorite author. So I'm covered by reading a book by my favorite author, which is Stephen King. So this is kind of an inaugural book for me in a way. It's the first book I'm reading on my new channel for the year, and the first book that is the first book of the Dark Tower series that I'm taking on, and the first book I'm reading for a communal reading challenge. And as this is going to be a journey, obviously the next book I'm going to read in the series is The Drawing of the Three, which I've just recently started and got quite a little ways through it. And so far, a little bit better than the first book. I got to be honest. I think I'm going to like this better than The Gunslinger. Okay, so that's all I've got for now. If you've stuck around this long, thank you so much for watching. I hope this was somewhat interesting. And if you're reading the Dark Tower series, let me know. If you've read it before, let me know as well. And I hope to see you in the next video.